the hospital dispensary at night. Helena Mercer stands at the wooden counter, compounding a fever tincture by candlelight, her hands moving with the precision her father taught her before he died mid-project, leaving debts she believed she had paid alone. The door opens, and Lord Harland, Duke of Caversham, enters carrying the lancet and a paper bag of lemons, placing both on the counter before sitting in the chair he has occupied for 8 months, asking her to turn to page 12 on chloroform dosing. She trusts this ritual completely, his voice and her hands, the lemons he brings without being asked, the medical journals he reads aloud while she works. She does not know that the counter beneath her fingers, the candles lighting her workspace, the roof above their heads, were paid for by the man reading 3 feet away. He knows. Every word he reads is a word he is not saying. Helena measures laudanum into a glass vial, her attention divided between the tincture and Harland's voice as he reads the passage on anesthetic administration. She has heard him stumble over medical terminology before. He is not a physician, merely a duke with an unusual interest in surgical innovation. But tonight, his voice is steady, almost careful. She glances at him briefly. He sits with his shoulders against the chair back, the lancet open in his hands, his gaze fixed on the page as though the words require his full concentration. The candlelight catches the line of his jaw, the faint tension in the way he holds the journal. Helena stopped him. "Stop there. The dosage is incorrect. The author is citing Liston's trial, but Liston revised his measurements after the second patient died. The correct ratio is 1 part chloroform to 4 parts air, not 3. Harland looks up from the page, his expression shifting from concentration to something that might be admiration. "You have the revision memorized." "I attended the lecture where he presented the correction," Helena replies, returning to the tincture. "If I prescribe anesthesia based on outdated information, someone dies. I do not have the luxury of forgetting." He nods slowly, marking the correction in the margin of the journal with a pencil he keeps in his coat pocket. "I will write to the editor. The article should be retracted." "You do not need to write on my behalf." "I am not writing on your behalf," Harland says quietly. "I am writing because you are correct and the journal is wrong. That is reason enough." Helena pauses, her hands stilling over the pestle. She has known him for 8 months. Since the Royal Society lecture on surgical anesthesia, where he asked an intelligent question, and she corrected his conclusion in front of 200 physicians. He returned the following week with a copy of the Lancet and asked if she would explain the article he had misunderstood. The courtship, if it can be called that, has been conducted in lecture halls and hospital corridors, in this dispensary where she compounds tinctures while he reads aloud, in the quiet spaces where her work and his attention have somehow become inseparable. She resumes grinding the feverfew, the pestle moving in steady circles against the mortar. Continue reading. The next section addresses post-operative recovery. Harland finds his place on the page and begins again, his voice filling the dispensary with a measured cadence of medical prose. Helena works while he reads, her hands moving through the familiar motions of her trade, measuring, grinding, filtering, while his voice provides the rhythm she has come to rely on. She does not see the way his gaze lifts from the page every few sentences to watch her hands, the way his grip tightens on the journal when she leans closer to the candle to check the tincture's clarity. He knows what she does not, that 2 years ago, when Dr. Mercer died and left his eldest daughter with a half-built hospital and £1,200 in debts, Harland assumed every penny owed, funded the hospital's completion, and settled an annuity on Helena's Uncle Edwin, with 3 conditions attached. Edwin would support Harland's canal bill in Parliament. Edwin would ensure Helena remained in London, attached to the hospital, where Harlan could know her. And Helena would never learn the arrangement existed. Harlan made the deal because he fell in love with her at that first lecture. Not with her beauty, though she was beautiful, but with the precision of her mind and the quiet authority in her voice when she corrected him in front of 200 men who would not have hired her to empty their chamber pots. He understood immediately that if she discovered a duke had purchased her family's survival and then courted her inside the life he had bought, she would never accept him. So he built the foundation in secret and hoped the structure standing on it would be strong enough to survive the truth when it came. Tonight, reading about chloroform dosages while she measures feverfew, he almost tells her. The words sit in his throat like stones. I paid for this counter, these candles, the roof above us. But he swallows them and continues reading because the alternative is watching her walk away before he has found the courage to explain why he did it. Helena finishes the tincture and pours it into a labeled bottle, setting it on the shelf beside 24 others she has prepared this week. That is enough for tonight, she says, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Clement will need the fever remedy by morning, and I still have to check the ward before I leave. Harlan closes the lancet and stands, tucking the journal under his arm. I will walk you to the ward. You do not need to walk me 20 feet through my own hospital. He answered quietly. I know, but I would like to. He follows her anyway, his footsteps steady behind hers as she moves through the dispensary door and into the narrow corridor that leads to the main ward. The hospital is quiet at this hour. 16 beds arranged in 2 rows, most of them occupied by patients who cannot afford the private physicians in Mayfair. Helena pauses at the first bed to check the breathing of a child recovering from pneumonia, her hand resting briefly on the boy's forehead to assess his fever. Harlan stands in the doorway, watching her move from bed to bed with the same precision she brings to compounding tinctures. She adjusts a blanket here, checks a pulse there, speaks quietly to a woman who cannot sleep. He has watched her do this for 8 months and has never once seen her hurry, never seen her dismiss a patient's complaint as trivial. She treats a dock worker's broken arm with the same care she would give a lord's gout. And it is this. Not her beauty, not her intellect, but her refusal to measure a person's worth by their ability to pay. That made him love her. She finishes her rounds and returns to the doorway where he waits. Everything is stable. Nell will manage the night shift. Then I will walk you to the gate, Harlan says. Helena does not argue. They walk together through the corridor and out into the small courtyard that separates the hospital from the street. The night air is cool, carrying the scent of coal smoke and the Thames. Harlan stops at the iron gate and turns to face her. Thank you for the lemons, Helena says. I was running low. I know. You mentioned it last week. She looks at him in the dim light from the street lamp, her expression unreadable. You remember what I say about citrus stock? I remember everything you say. There's a silence between them, the kind that has become familiar over 8 months of shared work and careful conversation. Helena breaks it first. Good night, Lord Harland. Good night, Miss Mercer. He watches her walk through the gate and down the street until she turns the corner and disappears from view. Then he stands alone in the courtyard, gripping the iron bars of the gate he paid for, and wonders how much longer he can carry the weight of what she does not know. The same night, seen through different eyes. Harlan sits in his study at Caversham House with a glass of whiskey he has not touched, staring at the contract he signed 2 years ago. The document is simple: a transfer of funds, an assumption of debts. 3 conditions listed in Edwin Poole's careful handwriting. Harland has read it 100 times, searching for the moment when his love became a transaction. But the line does not exist. Both were true from the beginning. He remembers the day he met Helena with the clarity of a man who understands he is watching his life divide into before and after. The Royal Society Lecture Hall, a presentation on surgical anesthesia, 200 physicians, and a handful of interested aristocrats. Harland attended because his younger brother Daniel drowned in a canal accident 15 years ago. And Harland has spent the years since trying to make the world safer through better engineering, better safety measures, better everything. He thought a lecture on anesthesia might offer insights into trauma care. Helena sat in the second row, the only woman in the room who was not a physician's wife attending out of social obligation. She wore a dark blue dress and no jewelry. And when the lecturer concluded his presentation with a recommendation for chloroform dosing, she raised her hand and said, "You are citing Liston's original trial. But Liston revised his measurements after the second patient died. The ratio you are recommending will kill someone." The room went silent. The lecturer, a prominent surgeon from Guy's Hospital, stared at her as though she had spoken in tongues. Harland, sitting 3 rows behind her, leaned forward to hear her voice more clearly. The lecturer spoke carefully. "I beg your pardon?" Liston presented a correction at the Medical Society meeting in March. Helena continued, her voice calm and precise. 1 part chloroform to 4 parts air, not 3. If you administer the dosage you are recommending, the patient will suffer respiratory failure. I have seen it happen. The lecturer's face darkened. "And where, madam, have you seen surgical anesthesia administered?" "In my father's hospital in Southwark, Dr. William Mercer. He trained under Liston and attended the March meeting where the correction was presented. I assisted in 17 anesthetic procedures before my father's death, and in 3 of them we had to revive patients who were given the incorrect ratio you are currently advocating." Harland watched the room shift. Some physicians leaning forward with interest, others exchanging glances that suggested they thought Helena was mad or improper or both. The lecturer cleared his throat and said he would review Liston's recent publications, then moved swiftly to the next question. But Harland did not hear the rest of the lecture. He heard only Helena's voice, steady and unapologetic, correcting a prominent surgeon in front of 200 men because the alternative was letting someone die from bad information. After the lecture, Harland approached her in the hall. "Excuse me, miss." She turned to face him. "Mercer, Helena Mercer." "Lord Harland?" he replied, then hesitated, unsure how to frame the question he wanted to ask. "The correction you mentioned about the chloroform dosing. Do you have access to Liston's revised publication? I would like to read it." She studied him for a moment, her gaze direct and assessing. "Why?" "Because, if you are correct, the information should be widely circulated. And if I am being honest, because I have never heard a woman speak with such authority on a medical matter, and I would like to understand how you came to know more than the surgeon presenting tonight." Helena's expression did not soften, but something in her posture shifted slightly, as though she had decided he was worth answering. "My father trained me. Informally, of course. No medical school will admit a woman. But he believed competence mattered more than propriety, so he taught me what he knew. When he died 6 months ago, I took over his charity hospital. 16 beds, 2 nurses, a dispensary I stock myself. The patients do not care whether I have a diploma. They care whether I can set a bone or compound a tincture that stops their child's fever." Harland listened, and in the space of that answer, he fell in love. Not with her beauty, though she was beautiful, not with her defiance, though she was defiant. He fell in love with the precision of her mind and the quiet certainty in her voice when she said competence mattered more than propriety. He wanted to know everything about her, how she learned to compound tinctures, what her father taught her, how she managed a hospital at 27 without a husband or a medical degree, or the protection of a profession that did not want her. He returned to the lecture hall the following week with a copy of The Lancet and asked if she would explain the article he had misunderstood. She agreed, and the courtship began. Slow, careful, built on shared work and intelligent conversation. Harland brought journals and questions. Helena corrected his conclusions and explained the medicine her father had taught her. They met in lecture halls and hospital corridors, and eventually in the dispensary where she worked at night, compounding tinctures by candlelight while he read aloud. He did not tell her that 1 week after they met, he visited her Uncle Edwin and learned that Dr. Mercer had died mid-project, leaving a half-built hospital and £1,200 in debts that Edwin could not pay. The family faced ruin. Helena would lose the hospital, her younger sister would lose her music tutors, and Edwin would lose the modest estate that had been in the Poole family for 3 generations. Harland made his offer that same night. He would assume all debts, fund the hospital's completion, and settle an annuity sufficient to keep the family stable. In return, Edwin would support Harland's canal safety bill in Parliament, ensure Helena remained in London, attached to the hospital where Harland could court her, and never tell Helena the arrangement existed. Edwin hesitated. "You are asking me to lie to my niece." "I am asking you to let me court her without the taint of rescue," Harland replied. "If she learns that I paid her family's debts and then pursued her, she will never trust my motives. She will assume I see her as an obligation, not a woman I admire. I need time to show her that my interest is genuine before she learns how it began." Edwin studied him across the desk in his study, his expression unreadable. "And if she discovers the truth before you are ready to tell her?" "Then I will answer for it," Harland said. "But I would rather answer for acting out of love than stand by and watch her lose everything because I was too proud to help." Edwin signed the contract. Harland paid the debts, funded the hospital's completion, and began courting Helena in the only way he knew, by showing up, asking intelligent questions, and listening when she spoke. He told himself the deal was a foundation, nothing more. The structures standing on it, the courtship, the shared work, the quiet intimacy of reading aloud while she compounded tinctures, was real. She trusted him because he had earned her trust, not because he had purchased it. But tonight, sitting in his study with a contract in his hands, Harland cannot ignore the truth that has haunted him for 8 months. He built the foundation in secret and courted her inside walls he paid for. She does not know that the counter beneath her hands, the candles lighting her workspace, the roof above their heads, exist because he loved her and feared she would refuse his help if she knew. He has almost told her a dozen times. Tonight, reading about chloroform dosages, he came closer than ever, but the words would not form. And he let the moment pass, and now he sits alone in his study wondering how much longer he can carry the weight of what she does not know. The door to the study opens, and Edwin Poole enters without knocking. He looks older than he did 2 years ago. The lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. "You sent for me?" He shook his head. "I did not." "Then why am I here?" Edwin asks, crossing to the desk and pouring himself a glass of whiskey without invitation. "Because you know I am going to tell her, and you are here to convince me not to." Edwin drinks, then sets the glass down with a soft clink. "I am here because you have been staring at that contract for 8 months. and I am tired of waiting for you to make a decision. Tell her or do not tell her, but stop acting as though you are the only man in England who has ever loved a woman he could not have without complication." Harlan looks at him sharply. "She deserves to know the truth." "She deserves many things," Edwin replies. "The truth is only one of them. What she does not deserve is to lose the hospital she has built because you need to unburden your conscience." "The hospital I built," Harlan corrects. "The hospital you paid for," Edwin says. "Helena built it. She hired the nurses, stocked the dispensary, treated the patients, and turned your money into something that saves lives. If you tell her now, she will question every decision she has made for 2 years. She will wonder whether the patients trust her competence or your funding. She will ask herself whether you courted her because you loved her or because you felt entitled to the woman whose life you purchased. You will take the foundation you built and use it to destroy the structure standing on it." Harlan grips the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. "I cannot court her honestly while she does not know." "Then you are courting her dishonestly," Edwin says bluntly. "And you have been doing so for 8 months. The question is not whether you have lied. The question is whether you will continue lying or whether you will tell her the truth and accept the consequences." A heavy pause fills the room. Harlan releases the desk and leans back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the contract. "What would you do?" Edwin finishes his whiskey and sets the glass down. "I would tell her, not because it is the right thing to do, but because I am a coward who cannot carry a secret this heavy. You are a better man than I am, Harlan. You have carried it for 8 months without breaking. But if you tell her now, you will break her instead, and I do not think you are prepared for that." He leaves without waiting for a response. Harlan sits alone in the study, the contract still open on the desk, and wonders whether Edwin is right. 3 days later, the hospital ward in the early hours of morning. Helena stands at the bedside of Mrs. Burrell, a canal investor's wife admitted the previous night with a high fever and delirium. The woman thrashes against the sheets, her skin hot to the touch, her breathing rapid and shallow. Helena presses a cool cloth to Mrs. Burrell's forehead and speaks in the calm, steady voice she uses with patients who cannot hear her. "Mrs. Burrell, you are in the charity hospital in Southwark. You have a fever, but we are treating it. You are safe." Mrs. Burrell's eyes open, unfocused and glassy. She stares at Helena as though seeing someone else. "The Duke," she whispers. "Your Duke. He paid my husband's losses too." Helena freezes, the cloth still pressed to Mrs. Burrell's forehead. "What did you say?" 2 years ago, the canal investments. My husband lost everything, and your Duke paid the debts. £1,200, same as your uncle." Mrs. Burrell's voice is slurred, the words tumbling out in the fractured rhythm of fever delirium. "He paid everyone. Bought the votes for his bill. Your uncle, my husband, all of us." Helena's hand stills. She looks at Nell, the head nurse standing on the other side of the bed. "Did you hear that?" Nell nods slowly. "I heard it, miss. But she is delirious. Fever makes people say all manner of things that are not true." Helena sets down the cloth and steps back from the bed, her mind already moving through the statement like a diagnostic puzzle. Mrs. Burrell is delirious, yes. But delirium does not invent specific details. It distorts them. £1,200. The same amount her uncle owed. The canal investments, Harlan's bill. She turns to Nell. "Continue the fever treatment. Cold compresses every hour. If her temperature does not drop by morning, send for me immediately." Nell agreed. Yes, miss. Helena leaves the ward and walks to the dispensary, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. She stands at the counter where Harlan sat 3 nights ago, reading about chloroform dosages while she compounded tinctures. The counter is clean, the candles replaced, the tinctures labeled and shelved. Everything is in order. Everything is as it should be. Except Mrs. Burrell's words will not leave her mind. Your Duke paid my husband's losses too. Helena is a diagnostician. She does not treat symptoms without understanding the disease. And so she decides, standing alone in the dispensary at dawn, that she will investigate silently rather than confront immediately. She will trace the statement like a fever, find the source, assess the severity, determine whether treatment is required. She does not yet know that the disease is not in Mrs. Burrell's delirium. It is in the foundation beneath her feet. Helena begins her investigation the way she approaches every difficult case, with evidence, not emotion. She spends the next 2 days reviewing the hospital's financial records, tracing the payments that funded the building's completion 2 years ago. The records are clear. A single anonymous donation of £1,500, paid in 3 installments over 6 months, with no name attached. She makes discreet inquiries among the referring physicians who send patients to the hospital. Dr. Cartwright, who refers most of the surgical cases, tells her the hospital's reputation is built on her competence, not its funding. Dr. Ashford, who sends pediatric cases, mentions in passing that he heard a Duke had taken an interest in the hospital's success, but assumed it was general philanthropy. Which Duke? Helena asks. Caversham, I believe. He has funded several charitable projects since his brother's death. Canals, hospitals, that sort of thing. Why do you ask? Helena does not answer. She thanks Dr. Ashford and leaves his office, her mind assembling the pieces of the puzzle with the same precision she uses to diagnose a patient. Harland, the Duke of Caversham. £1,500, 2 years ago, when her father died and left the hospital half-built. She does not want to believe it. But the evidence is accumulating, and Helena has never been able to ignore evidence simply because it contradicts what she wants to be true. On the 3rd day, she confronts her Uncle Edwin in his study. She does not ask permission, does not send word ahead. She simply arrives at his townhouse in the late afternoon and walks past the butler into the study where Edwin sits reading correspondence. Helena, he says, looking up in surprise. I was not expecting you. I need you to tell me the truth, Helena says, closing the door behind her. 2 years ago, when Father died and left the hospital unfinished. How did you pay the debts? Edwin sets down the letter he was reading, his face shifting from surprise to something closer to resignation. Why are you asking? Because a patient told me that Lord Harland paid her husband's canal investment losses, £1,200, the same amount Father owed. And I need to know whether Harland paid our debts too. Edwin is silent for a long moment. Then he stands, crosses to the window, and speaks without looking at her. He did. Helena's breath catches, but she does not move. Tell me everything. Edwin turns to face her, his hands clasped behind his back. 2 years ago, I was facing ruin. Your father's death left £1,200 in debts I could not pay. The hospital was half-built. Your sister's tutors were threatening to leave, and I was preparing to sell the estate to cover what I owed. Lord Harland came to me 1 week after your father's funeral and offered to assume all debts, fund the hospital's completion, and settle an annuity on the family. In exchange for what? Helena asks, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. 3 conditions, Edwin says. I would support his canal safety bill in Parliament. I would ensure you remained in London, attached to the hospital, where he could court you, and you would never learn the arrangement existed. Helena grips the back of the chair in front of her, her knuckles white. He bought my life. He saved it, Edwin corrects. And he did so because he fell in love with you at a medical lecture, and understood that if you discovered a duke had purchased your family's survival, you would never accept him. He wanted to court you honestly, Helena. But he could not do so without first ensuring you had a life worth living. So he made the decision for me, Helena says, her voice sharp. He decided I could not be trusted with the truth. He decided I would rather starve than accept help. He decided correctly, Edwin interrupts, because you would have refused the money, closed the hospital, and lost everything out of pride. Your father would have done the same. I was not going to let his daughter repeat his mistake. Helena stares at him, the weight of his words settling over her like a shroud. You agreed to this. You let him buy my ignorance? I agreed to let him save your life, Edwin says quietly, and I would do it again. You can hate me for it if you wish, but I will not apologize for accepting a lifeline when the alternative was watching you drown. Helena releases the chair and steps back, her mind racing. She wants to argue, to tell Edwin he was wrong, to insist she would have found another way. But the truth is, she does not know what she would have done. She does not know whether she would have accepted Harlan's help if she had known, or whether she would have refused out of pride and lost the hospital her father spent his life building. Does Harlan know I am aware? She asks. Not yet, Edwin replies, but he will. He has been carrying this secret for 8 months, and it is destroying him. If you confront him, be prepared for the fact that he loves you. That was never part of the deal. That was always real. Helena nods once, then turns and leaves the study without another word. She walks through the townhouse and out into the street, her mind working through the evidence she has gathered. Harlan assumed her family's debts, funded the hospital's completion, asked Edwin to keep her in London where Harlan could court her. The deal was real. The courtship was built inside it. But the question she cannot answer is whether the love was real too, or whether it was always part of the transaction. Helena does not stop seeing Harlan. This is the part that surprises her. She expected anger to drive her away, to make every interaction unbearable. But instead, she finds herself watching him more closely, searching for signs of ownership, for evidence that he sees her as something he purchased rather than something he earned. She finds none. 4 days after her confrontation with Edwin, Harlan arrives at the hospital in the late afternoon, carrying the lancet and a paper bag of oranges. He places the oranges on the dispensary counter and sits in his chair without preamble. Page 43. Compound fractures. Helena measures a dose of willow bark extract, her hand steady despite the weight of what she knows. Read. He reads while she works, his voice filling the dispensary with the measured cadence of medical prose. She listens to the way he stumbles over a Latin term, the way he pauses to ask whether she agrees with the author's conclusion, the way he marks corrections in the margin when she points out an error. He does not act like a man who owns her. He acts like a man who is trying to learn something she knows better than he does. When he finishes the section, Helena sets down the willow bark and looks at him directly. Why do you come here? Harlan closes the lancet, his expression cautious. To read to you. We have been doing this for 8 months. But why? Helena presses. You are a duke. You could hire a physician to explain medical journals. You could attend lectures at the Royal Society without sitting in a charity hospital dispensary. Why do you come here? He is silent for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. Because I would rather spend an hour listening to you correct my understanding of compound fractures than spend a week doing anything else. Helena's chest tightens, but she does not look away. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have, Harlan says quietly. I come here because being near you is the only thing that makes sense to me. I read to you because I love the sound of your attention. I bring oranges because you mentioned needing citrus stock, and I want to be the person who remembers. If there is a better reason, I do not know what it is. She searches his face for deception and finds only the same careful honesty he has shown her for 8 months. It makes the moral burden worse, not better. She cannot locate the villain in the man she loves, and so the anger has nowhere to go except inward, where it sits like a stone in her chest. Thank you for the oranges, she says finally. Harlan nods, picks up the lancet, and leaves without asking why she asked the question. Helena stands alone in the dispensary, gripping the counter he paid for, and wonders how long she can carry the weight of what she knows and he does not know she knows. The turning point comes at the hospital's midpoint review, a meeting Helena holds every 6 months to assess the institution's financial sustainability. She sits in the small office adjacent to the dispensary with Nell, reviewing the account ledgers line by line. We have been self-sustaining for 18 months, Nell says, pointing to the columns of income and expenses. The fees from patients who can pay, the donations from referring physicians, the grant from the medical society. It covers operating costs and leaves a small surplus for equipment. Helena stares at the numbers, her mind processing what Nell has just said. 18 months. The hospital has been self-sustaining on its own fees and donations for 18 months. The foundation was Harlan's. The initial £1,500 that completed the building paid the debts and allowed the hospital to open. But the functioning institution she runs today, the one that treats patients and trains nurses and compounds tinctures that save lives, is hers. The distinction matters. It does not resolve the violation. Harlan still made a decision about her life without her consent, still built the foundation in secret and courted her inside walls she did not know he paid for. But it means the hospital she believes she built alone is not entirely a fiction. She did build it. She simply built it on a foundation someone else provided. Miss Mercer? Nell's voice pulls her back to the present. Are you all right? She nodded slowly. Yes, I am fine. Thank you for the review. Nell leaves, and Helena sits alone in the office, staring at the closed ledger. She has made her moral decision. She will investigate fully before confronting Harlan. She will gather all the evidence, understand the full scope of what he did. And then she will ask him the question that has been building in her chest for days. Was I always part of the deal? But first, she needs to know whether the hospital's independence is real or whether it exists only because Harlan allows it to. The answer comes 2 weeks later, at a medical society lecture where Helena presents a paper on fever management in pediatric cases. The lecture hall is full, physicians, medical students, and a handful of aristocrats interested in public health. Harlan sits in the 3rd row, as he has for every lecture Helena has given in the past 8 months. She is halfway through her presentation when Dr. Rollins, a referring physician who has sent patients to the hospital in the past, raises his hand. Miss Mercer, I have a question about the hospital's funding structure. Helena pauses, her notes still in her hand. This lecture is about fever management, Dr. Rollins. If you have questions about hospital administration, I am happy to address them after the presentation. I think the question is relevant, Rollins says, standing. You are advocating for a treatment protocol that requires significant resources. nursing staff, medication, isolation wards. If the hospital's funding is dependent on a single patron, how can we trust that the institution will remain operational long enough to implement the protocol you're recommending? The room goes quiet. Helena feels the weight of 200 gazes on her, waiting to see how she will respond. She glances briefly at Harland, who sits perfectly still, his expression unreadable. The hospital has been self-sustaining on patient fees and donations for 18 months. Helena says, her voice calm and precise. The initial funding allowed us to complete the building and begin operations. But the institution you see today operates independently. If you would like to review the financial records, Dr. Rollins, I am happy to provide them. And if the patron is courting the hospital's director, Rollins continues, what independence does the institution truly have? Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. The patron's personal interest in the director does not affect the hospital's medical practice. The treatment protocols I am recommending are based on clinical evidence, not financial considerations. If you doubt the hospital's competence, Dr. Rollins, I invite you to visit and inspect our records yourself. You will find that the funding is his, but the medicine is mine. The room is silent for a beat, and then one of the physicians in the front row begins to clap. The applause spreads, and Rollins sits down, his face flushed. Helena finishes her presentation without further interruption. After the lecture, Rollins approaches her in the hall. I apologize for the interruption, Miss Mercer. My question was impertinent. Your question was fair, Helena replies, but the answer stands. The hospital's independence is not a courtesy. It is a fact. Rollins nods and leaves. Helena stands alone in the hall, her notes still clutched in her hand, and realizes that she has just defended the hospital's legitimacy in front of 200 physicians. She defended it not because Harlan's money was irrelevant, but because the work she has done in the 18 months since the hospital opened is real, measurable, and independent of the foundation he provided. The distinction matters, but it does not erase the violation. 2 days later, Dr. Rollins visits the hospital. He inspects the financial records, reviews patient charts, and observes Helena treating a child with scarlet fever. When he finishes, he finds her in the dispensary. The funding is his, Rollins says. The medicine is yours. I was wrong to question the hospital's independence. I have a patient with a complex fracture I would like to refer. Send him tomorrow, Helena says. Rollins leaves, and Helena sits in Harlan's chair for the first time, picking up the Lancet he left open to the page they were reading together. She begins to separate the deal from the love in her mind. Same man, different acts. The man who paid her family's debts did so out of fear and control, believing he knew better than she did what she needed. The man who read to her for 8 months did so because he loved the sound of her focus, because being near her was the only thing that made sense to him. Both truths occupied the same space. Both were real, and she did not consent to the architecture that held them together. That same night, Edwin visits Harland at Caversham House. He does not wait for the butler to announce him. He walks directly into the study where Harland sits staring at the same contract he's been staring at for 8 months. Edwin spoke without preamble. She knows. Harland looks up sharply. How long? 2 weeks. She confronted me after Mrs. Burrell's delirium. I told her everything, the debts, the annuity, the conditions. She has been investigating the hospital's finances, reviewing records, making inquiries. Rollins challenged her publicly at the medical society, and she defended the hospital's independence with clinical precision. She is not running from the truth, Harland. She is dissecting it. Harland sets down the contract, his hands shaking slightly. Does she hate me? I do not know, Edwin says honestly. But she has not stopped seeing you. She watches you now, looks for signs of ownership, I think. She is trying to separate the deal from the love, trying to understand whether you courted her because you felt entitled or because you genuinely care. Harlan stands, crossing to the window. I need to tell her myself. Then go, Edwin says. But do not go to explain, go to answer. She is a diagnostician, Harlan. She does not need you to justify what you did. She needs you to stand in front of her and answer the question she's been asking herself for 2 weeks. Was she always part of the deal? Or was she the reason you made it? Harlan does not wait. He leaves the study, orders his carriage, and goes to the hospital at midnight. Not to strategize, not to prepare a defense, but to answer. The hospital dispensary at midnight. Helena stands behind the counter where she compounds tinctures, her hands resting on the wooden surface Harlan paid for. She let herself in through the side entrance, needing the quiet space to think, to separate the deal from the love one more time before she decides what to do. The door opens, and Harlan enters without knocking. He does not apologize for the intrusion, does not ask permission. He simply stands on the other side of the counter, the workspace between them, the space the deal built. Helena does not move. You know that I know. Edwin told me tonight, Harlan says. His voice is steady, but his hands grip the edge of the counter as though he needs the support. How long were you going to wait before telling me yourself? Helena asks. I do not know, Harlan admits. I have been trying to find the words for 8 months. Tonight, when Edwin told me you knew, I stopped looking for the right words and came to give you the only answer I have. Her voice was quiet but firm. Then answer the question. Was I always part of the deal? Harlan does not look away. You were the reason I made it. That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters, Harlan says. 2 years ago, I attended a lecture on surgical anesthesia because I thought it might help me understand how to save lives after accidents like the one that killed my brother. You were sitting in the second row, and when the lecturer recommended a chloroform dosage that would kill someone, you raised your hand and corrected him in front of 200 men. I fell in love with you in that moment. Not with your beauty, not with your defiance, but with the precision of your mind and the quiet certainty in your voice when you said competence mattered more than propriety. Helena's hands tightened on the counter, but she remained silent. 1 week later, I learned that your father had died and left £1,200 in debts your uncle could not pay. Harlan continues. I learned the hospital was half built, and you were preparing to close it because there was no money to finish what he started. I went to Edwin and offered to assume the debts, fund the hospital's completion, and settle an annuity on your family. I asked him to keep you in London where I could know you, and I asked him never to tell you the arrangement existed. Because you knew I would refuse, Helena says, her voice sharp. Because I was afraid of what you would choose, Harlan corrects. I was afraid you would refuse the money and close the hospital. Your uncle said the same thing, that you would rather starve clean than eat from a hand you did not choose. I believed him, and I was wrong to act as though I knew your mind. Helena releases the counter and steps back, her breath coming faster. You took my choice away. He met her eyes directly. I did, and I cannot undo that. The money is spent. The hospital stands. But the choice I took from you was not whether to accept my help. It was whether to trust me, knowing where the foundation came from. I robbed you of the ability to decide whether love born inside a transaction could be trusted. That is the thing I cannot give back. A long pause stretched between them. The moonlight cuts across the dispensary floor, illuminating the counter where they have spent 8 months reading and working together. Helena grips her hands together to stop them from shaking. "Did you know the hospital has been self-sustaining for 18 months?" she asks. He answered simply, "Yes." "Then you know the foundation is yours, and everything standing on it is mine." "That is what I have always known," Harlan says. "The hospital you run today, the nurses you hired, the patients you treated, the tinctures you compounded, none of that exists because I paid for it. It exists because you built it. I gave you walls. You gave the walls a purpose." Helena looks at him, searching his face for deception. "If you knew that, why did you not tell me sooner?" "Because I was a coward," Harlan says simply. "I was afraid that if you learned the truth, you would question everything we built together. I was afraid you would see the deal and not the love. And I was afraid I would lose you before I had the chance to prove that what I felt for you was real." Her voice broke slightly. "Was the love real?" "It was the only real thing," Harlan says. "The deal was fear. The courtship was hope. The love was the reason I made the deal in the first place. I wanted you to have a life worth living so that I could spend mine trying to be part of it." Helena closes her eyes, and when she opens them, the moonlight has shifted slightly, casting new shadows across the dispensary. "I need to leave this room." Harlan nods, releasing the counter. "I understand." "I am not saying no," Helena says quickly. "I am saying I cannot say yes in the room you paid for. I need to think. I need to decide whether I can trust you, knowing what you did." She walks past him, her footsteps echoing in the quiet dispensary. At the door, she pauses without turning around. "Come tomorrow, not here. The lecture hall. Neutral ground, 3rd row." He answered quietly, "I will be there." Helena leaves, and Harlan stands alone in the dispensary with the moonlight cutting across the counter where she works. He does not move for a long time. He simply stands in the space the deal built and wonders whether he has lost her. 3 days pass. Harlan goes to the lecture hall every morning and sits in the 3rd row with the lancet open in his lap. Helena does not come. He does not leave. He sits in the 3rd row, waiting, because she told him to come, and he will not fail her again by assuming he knows what she needs. On the 4th morning, Helena enters the hospital dispensary where Nell is preparing the day's medications. Nell looks up, surprised. "Miss Mercer, I was not expecting you until this afternoon." "Has Lord Harlan come to the hospital?" Helena asks. "Not since you told him to go to the lecture hall," Nell replies. "Why?" Helena measures her words carefully. "Has he been going to the lecture hall?" "Every morning," Nell says. "Dr. Cartwright mentioned seeing him there. Sits in the 3rd row. Brings the lancet. Does not speak to anyone. Just waits." Helena sets down the pestle she was holding and looks at Nell. "Tell him to bring lemons tomorrow. I am low on citrus stock." Nell's expression shifts to something that might be relief. "I will tell him, miss." The next morning, Harlan enters the dispensary carrying lemons and the lancet. He places both on the counter and sits in his chair without preamble. Page 31. Compound fractures. Helena stands at the counter, her hands resting on the wooden surface. "Read." He reads while she works, his voice filling the dispensary with the measured cadence of medical prose. She listens to the sound of his voice, the way it has filled this space for 8 months, and realizes that she has made her decision. She stops him mid-sentence. "You understand the deal does not disappear." Harlan looks up from the journal. "I understand. You understand I will run this hospital with your money in my hands." and I will never pretend the money was not yours. I would not want you to pretend. And if you ever make a decision about my life without telling me, Helena says, her voice firm, I will remove you from this building. You will not be welcome back. He answered quietly, I understand. Helena resumes measuring the tincture, her hands steady despite the tightness in her chest. Continue reading. You stopped at the tibial fracture. Harlan finds his place on the page and begins again. His voice fills the ward, steady and careful, and Helena works while he reads. Outside, the church bell strikes 7, and the day begins. The deal does not disappear. The foundation remains his, and the structure standing on it remains hers. But the love, the sound of his voice reading medical journals, the lemons he brings without being asked, the way he waits in the 3rd row because she told him to come, that is theirs. Built not on a transaction, but on the slow, careful work of 2 people who chose each other despite the foundation they did not choose together. And that, Helena decides, is enough.